So today I'm going to be showing you how to create these gel print Russian dolls. I'm in a Facebook group where we do regular small art swaps, and this month's theme was to create these. Two of these are staying with me and the other four are being sent off to my partners. But I had so much fun making them, I thought I would share the process with you today in a video. Because not only was it a really fun project to create, but I used some prints that I'd got that I was not very happy with and renovated them into something really, really quite interesting and pretty to look at. And if you're anything like me, you've got a pile of prints where you think, oh, that didn't turn out how I wanted it. I don't like it that much. What do I do with it? So this is a good exercise for using up those prints. I've created a template. And I'll pop a link to this in the description below. So if you want to download and print it off, you can do. And then you're free to resize it however you want. Really simple template. We've got the main body, which obviously you cut out. And then we've got the scarf element and a little trim at the bottom. Now I've used bows on mine, little fabric bows. If you don't have any bows, I've included a little drawn bow, so you could always cut that out and layer that on as well if you want to. For the faces, I've used a stamp. And I've used this face stamp here, which was from James Luke Burke Creative Concept stamp. Now, don't go rushing to his Etsy store. He's in the process of redesigning his stamp line. This set of stamps is going to come back in a similar form, but not in its exact form. But you can use any face. I chose this one because I like it. I'd got another one of his stamp sets here with small faces on. I could have used one of these Dina Wakley faces. One of these, this wonky tonk one would have been perfect. If you don't have stamps, you could use printed faces. These Signature Collection Art by Marlene die cut shapes. Lots of faces there that could have been cut out and put on. Or indeed, just draw your own. It's entirely up to you. Lots of options, but as I say, I've used this stamp face because I like it and I enjoy colouring in faces. So I'm going to move these out of the way, and we're going to begin by showing you how to renovate some prints. So here's a selection of prints that I've got that, these are a bit boring, came out a bit dull, came out a bit muddy, not very clear, not particularly happy with the finish that I got on these. So I've pulled these out and thought, we'll go on to embellish these and make them more interesting. Now, you could get your gel plate out again and print on top of these. There is nothing wrong with doing that. But you don't necessarily have to do that. I've pulled out a couple of stencils here. This floral stencil is by Joggles. I like that design, just a nice sort of all over design. And then I've got this one with a circular design. I don't know if it will show up there. This is part of a longer one. It was like an 18-inch stencil by Deco Art, and I just cut it down because it's a bit more manageable to use. But I like these circular designs, so I'm going to use those as well. I've got some paint, just acrylic paint, because that's what's on my prints. Chosen some from the Americana range. We've got Sour Apple, Sea Breeze, Bright Salmon and Cadmium Yellow, and those colours I thought would coordinate quite well with any and all of the prints that I've got here today. So I'm going to be using a mixture of those. I've got a palette to pop some paint in, and I've got some sponge. This is just like cheap, just like a bath sponge, or you use a kitchen sponge, just cut up into pieces just to sponge through the stencil. So I'm going to get myself a craft mat down on the table to protect my surface, and we'll begin by adding some stencil detail to these prints. So I'm going to begin by using the floral stencil, and for this blue background I'm using the coral colour, the Bright Salmon, and I'm just going to stencil this floral design all over. So just taking a bit of paint on my sponge and dabbing through the stencil. I'm just going to cover the entire print. Now this technique works if you've got a print where you're quite happy with some of the print, but there's certain areas that you don't like. Just go in with a stencil over those areas that you don't like and add a bit of extra detail. But in this instance, I'm covering all of these. Say for whatever reason, they didn't come out that exciting. And this is just a quick and easy way to add some more detail and interest to the background. And as you can see, that's just added another layer on there and it's already starting to look better. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this stencil on all of the prints that I've got here, and I'm going to use various colours. If I'm going to do another one using this colour, I'll do it now, but when I want to switch colours, I'm going to rinse off my stencil, obviously, so I don't contaminate the colours and muddy them up, and I'm going to use a different piece of sponge for each colour paint that I'm using. And once I've got this floral layer on all of them, I'll come back and show you what they look like, and I'll move on to the next stage. So I've stenciled the floral design onto all of my prints, just using one of the 4 colours that I've chosen. And this has just created the first new layer on top, just to start bringing out a little bit of detail. So what I'm going to do next is take a fine liner pen. This is a uni pen fine line. It's a waterproof pen. You could use something like a Pigma Micron and another fine liner that's just as long as it's permanent, that's all that matters. You don't want it bleeding. And this is quite a fine one. It's a 0.1. And I'm going to draw around the outside of the stencil design just to add a little bit extra definition. And you can see here where I've done this on this. I've stenciled it in blue and just gone around with a black line. I'm just going to continue doing this all over this one, all over the other prints, and I'll show you what that looks like when I've finished. Now I've finished outlining all of my stencil designs in black pen, I can think about moving on to the next stage, which will be using the other stencil. But I hope you can just see here, it really does help that layer to just pop from the background by adding that little black outline. So I've done that on all of my prints, and next I'm going to use this other stencil, this circular design, which was one from Deco Art, and I'm just going to use this part up here. I like this one, it's not too busy. This floral one was an all over design, and now this one I can use more as a focal element just wherever I want to place it on the print. And I'm going to use the same 4 colours that I'd got originally, but I'm going to use obviously a different colour. So in this instance here, I've used the salmon colour. I'm going to choose a different colour paint, probably the yellow to go on here, or maybe the pale blue colour. And I'm going to stencil using the sponge just the same as before, and just add my second layer to the print. So again, just popping a bit more paint in my palette, placing my stencil onto my piece of card, and sponging through the design. And obviously, because I'm only using a small part of this stencil, I'm going to move it and replace it somewhere else and sponge through again. And I'm just going to continue with this until I'm happy that I've covered as much of this print that I want to. So that's my next layer done. And once again, I'm going to continue. I'm going to do this on all of the prints that I've got, using contrasting colours, choosing which colour I think is going to look best, and I'll come back to you when I've done that with all of them. And here's our second stencil design finished. And say, as you can see, just chose a different colour. The yellow is not so obvious at the moment, it's a fairly transparent colour, but that will be remedied in the next layer. But it just, again, starts to add more layer, more depth, more dimension to the designs that we've got. So what we're going to do now is, again, outline this design, but instead of using the black pen, we're going to use a white pen. And for this, you could use either a gel pen. My favourite white gel pen is the Uniball Signo Broad. I like that one. Or you could use a Posca paint pen. This is a 1M. You could use a 1M or a 1MR, something fairly fine. On my previous ones here, this was using the Posca pen, and that's probably what I'm going to use again today. But it just helps lift that layer, just makes the design pop a little bit. So I'm just going to give my Posca pen a bit of a shake, get the ink mixed up and ready to go. And just like before, we're going to start outlining that stenciled image. And I'm just going to continue to do that once again over all of this print and all the other prints that I've done, and I'll show you what they look like when I finish that. And here's our finished renovated prints. Really happy with how that white pen just highlights that second layer of the stencil and just brings the whole thing to life, really. So we're ready to start making our Russian dolls now. And I've cut out my templates. So this was my original base template, and then this was the one with all the elements. So we've got the headscarf, we've got a little bit of trim at the bottom, and we've got the knot that'll go on the headscarf if you're not using a bow. This bit basically you can sort of discard, you don't really need that. So we need to decide on which prints we're going to work together. And for the ones that I did previously, I took two prints that coordinated quite well and used one for the background on one of my dolls, and then used that same print as the accent pieces on the other one, and sort of vice versa. So they worked in pairs. So I'm going to have a little look at the prints that I've got here and see if I can match them into pairs that would work well together. I've got an odd number, so there's going to be something that doesn't get used here. But just want to sort of decide what I think is going to look well with something else. And I'm thinking this is going to be my odd one out, probably. The colours, with it having those neon brights in the background, don't really sort of go well with something else. So I'm thinking those two are going to work quite well together. I'm also thinking that those two will probably work quite well together, and that those two will work quite well together. So I think I'm going to use this pair as my first example here, and I'm going to position the body on one and draw around it. Obviously these are reasonably small prints, so I want to make sure that I have got enough left to fit the headpiece on as well, and then my little bit of trim will go there. So I'm just going to take a pencil, draw around my template, and then I can cut it out. So there's our elements to create our dolls. Before gluing the layers together, I'm just going to edge round the pieces with some ink. And I'm just going to use some black archival ink here and a little foam applicator. And I just like the way that adding this finishes it off a little bit. It also helps define the different layers once they're stuck together. At this point you might want to just draw in the detail of the knot on this bow that we've cut out. Literally by just drawing a couple of little lines in there just to define it. So next we're going to take some glue. This is just my, this is a glue I always use, which is the Cosmic Shimmer acrylic glue. And I just pop them in these fine tip bottles. And there's a link to these in my Amazon storefronts below if you're interested. I just find it really good for applying a small amount of glue, which is all you need. I'm just going to layer that onto there, then take the opposite one and layer it onto the other base. Going to take the little contrasting strip for the bottom. And I'm going to pop the little tie onto the base of that head area. So here are my layered up Russian dolls, all but finished apart from putting the faces and a few final embellishments on. I did switch the pairs that I'd made as the colours just didn't seem to sit right. So this was the first two that we did, those layered up. Then I've layered the blue ones and the yellow ones together. And then finally I went for the two that had got the neon pink and popped those two together. I've stamped and coloured in some faces, and I've got my paper flowers and some little buttons here just to put an embellishment in their hair. So I'm just going to, we'll assemble one and then I'll get on with doing the others and show you the finished pieces. So I'm going to glue my face in place to start with. Again, just using a little of this Cosmic Shimmer glue. Popping that in place on the head. And I'm going to choose a little paper flower. I think we'll give her a little red flower. And then a button. I've just got a selection of little buttons here. I'm thinking that the green one might look, unless I've got a brighter green. I'm thinking one of those little tiny ones there. So little dab of glue onto the back of the flower, little dab of glue in the centre, and pop in a button, and that's her finished. So I'm going to continue in the same vein, decorate all of these up, and I'll be back to show you the finished dolls. And here are my finished dolls. As you can see, just added a little paper flower and a button to the top of each one, just for a little extra embellishment. Now I'm leaving the backs of these ones plain. The ones that I am swapping out in the Facebook group, I've just backed with some old dictionary page and inked around the edge. The ones I'm keeping, I'm probably going to pop them on a journal page, so I'm not bothering to sort of finish the back off. But you could always say either use a bit of book page, some patterned paper, another print or something. You can finish the backs off however you see fit. These would be lovely popped in a journal, put on the front of a greetings card. You could put them on a tag. You could use it as a bookmark. You could make a small hole in the top and make the doll itself into a tag. Lots of uses for these, and I hope that you've seen how easy it is to take a print that was, to be fair, in the throw pile and turn it into something that was worth keeping, and then create a really fun little project with it afterwards. So as always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Do check out the link in the end card to all my gel print videos. I pop them in a playlist and I'll link to that at the end. And once again, check in the description below for the post with the template on if you want to download that and do this yourself. But for now, that's all. Bye.